it's like coat and everything. And all you can do is just put it on your hand. Like, wow, that doesn't feel like a powder. It feels like a cream. It's just crazy, and that's just...
Good evening, everyone. I think we'll get started. Thanks for your patience. I know we're running a few minutes behind, but so many people are coming in, and we want to make sure everybody gets a chance to get here. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. I really want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I see a lot of new and familiar faces out there, and it feels like a lot of good, exciting energy in the room. My name is Dory Galels, and I am the Executive Director of Women's Voices for the Earth, otherwise known as Women's Voices. Women's Voices is a national environmental health and justice organization that was founded and is located right here in Missoula. We work specifically to reduce and eliminate toxic chemicals impacting public health and to cultivate a movement of women who are agents for social change. Since our inception in 1995, we have had a measurable impact on women's lives. We have closed polluting industrial facilities in the West, provided technical and organizing assistance to women facing toxic threats in their local communities. We've convinced global manufacturers to remove hazardous ingredients from consumer products. We've provided opportunities for young women to engage in environmental and social justice activism. And we have spawned diverse coalitions of organizations who are sounding the alarm about the unregulated nature of the chemicals industry. Women's Voices for the Earth is also a founding member of the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics, which is a national coalition of groups working to eliminate hazardous chemicals from personal care products. And the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics is a sponsor of this national book tour, of which this event in Missoula is part of. Before we get into the program this evening, I would like to thank and acknowledge our co-sponsors for this event, which include the University of Montana Environmental Studies Program, the Center for Environmental Health Sciences, the School of Public Health, and the Women's Center. I also want to recognize Melissa Piccoli, who's here this evening, has been a Women's Voices for the Earth volunteer. She's also an esthetician and the owner of Bijabadi Aesthetic Studio here in Missoula. She has dazzled us with her organizing capabilities for this event, and we're very grateful for her. I also want to thank Portico Real Estate, Betty's Divine, The Good Food Store, Rock and Rudy's, Grow Design, and Gateway Printing for their generous assistance with design and printing of promotional materials and publicity for this event. And I want to thank Missoula Community Access Television for being here to record tonight's discussion. And finally, I want to thank Genevieve Carey and her friends at Hellgate High School for putting together and distributing the goodie bags, as well as the cosmetics companies who've provided product samples for this event, including California Baby, My Shell, Jamu Spa, Montana Emu Ranch Company, and numerous others. All of these companies have signed the Compact for Safe Cosmetics, a pledge to not use chemicals that are known or strongly suspected of causing cancer, mutation, or birth defects in their products, and companies that are also implementing substitution plans to replace the hazardous materials with safer alternatives. So we're here tonight to tell you a powerful story, and it's a story that you will find surprising and appalling. And it's merely one example of how our use of everyday consumer products may be linked with a corresponding rise in chronic diseases. It's a story that underscores how we, as consumers, are under the false impression that the products we buy are safe. We hope that this event will inspire you to act, and we will provide suggestions as to how you can act. The time is now. There is a tremendous amount of national momentum on these issues. It's been very encouraging, and there have been headline stories in USA Today, the New York Times. We've been on Good Morning America, San Francisco Chronicle, Vogue magazine, and many, many others. So these issues have hit the mainstream press, and the interest and awareness in these issues is only going to continue to grow. The state of California is driving major changes in the marketplace with legislation that requires disclosure of potentially harmful ingredients in health and beauty products, and bans on reproductive toxins like bisphenol A in baby bottles, kids' toys, and Nalgene water bottles, and phthalates, which are plastic softeners found in a wide range of products across the marketplace. While we want to give you tools to help you make healthier, more informed consumer choices, we also hope that you will lend your voice to change by holding cosmetics companies and the federal government accountable for failing to protect your health and the health of your families. We're going to begin our program tonight with Stacy Malkin, the author of the compelling new book called Not Just a Pretty Face, The Ugly Side of the Beauty Industry. And following Stacy, we will hear short presentations from a panel of experts who will talk more about the field of environmental health sciences and research, advocacy, and entrepreneurial endeavors that serve to promote better regulation of chemicals and safer, non-toxic technologies for consumer products. At the conclusion of those presentations, we will open up the conversation with you for questions and answers, and Melissa Piccoli will moderate that discussion. So now I'd like to introduce Stacy. Stacy has been a longtime colleague and friend of Women's Voices for the Earth, and we are thrilled and honored to have her here tonight in Missoula as part of this national book tour. Although this is probably the smallest city on the tour, we are confident that it will be one of her most memorable events. Am I right about that, Missoula? Okay. Stacy has made endless contributions to the environmental health movement for many years. She's a former journalist and newspaper editor, and currently the communications director of Healthcare Without Harm, which is a global coalition of over 400 organizations in 52 countries that are working to transform the healthcare industry so that it is no longer a source of harm to people in the environment. She's also a co-founder and media strategist for the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Stacy Malkan.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Dory, to the University of Montana, to Women's Voices for the Earth. I'm so glad to be in Missoula. This is the 6th stop on our national tour for the book, and the biggest crowd that we've had yet, so thank you. I wanted to start out with a question for the audience. Raise your hand. How many people used multiple personal care products before coming here tonight? So shampoo, conditioner, face cream, deodorant, contact solutions, soap, toothpaste. I usually try to keep going until some of the skeptical guys in the audience raise their hands. I see a few holdouts, but we all use these products, and so the stories that I'm about to tell are really the stories of all of us. And I'll tell a little bit about my own personal story. I confess in the book that back when I was a teenager, I was a 17 magazine reading makeup diva when I was going to high school at Lynn Classical in north of Boston. And the Osco drug cosmetics aisle was really my comfort zone. With each measured purchase, I was one step closer to that girl I dreamed of, the confident, lovable version of me. So I had an elaborate morning routine that involved various skin creams and 8 kinds of makeup and all sorts of hair products, all topped off with a giant cloud of Aquanet Extra Super Hold hairspray and the pink metal can. Does anyone remember that? Yeah. And so, I was using about 20 products a day, and for the book I went back and I looked at those products more closely. I looked at what was in them, and I found out that I was exposing myself to 200 chemicals a day before I even got on the school bus. So that was quite an eye-opener. And I think that's the story of many teens. And I still do use many personal care products, but I've left behind a lot of the old brands as I've learned about these issues. So, what's in these products that we all rub on our bodies and rub in our hair? And that's been a question that many people have been asking much more recently. And I wanted to talk about 2 things that we're really learning from the science, and I think the things that bring us here tonight. Because in just the last 5 to 10 years, the science has just been pouring out that is showing that even very low doses of toxic chemicals can disrupt hormones, can interfere with the way our bodies develop, and can contribute to diseases such as testicular cancer, breast cancer, diabetes, infertility, and other diseases that have been rising in humans over the past few decades. Another thing that's new, relatively new, that we're learning from science is that scientists we now know that chemicals are ending up where they're really not supposed to be, inside of our bodies. Through a new scientific technique called biomonitoring, researchers can now measure the chemicals that are getting into people. They call this our body burden. And the Centers for Disease Control since the year 2000 has been monitoring a cross-section of the American population. And so we know that all of us are contaminated with scores of industrial chemicals that are known to be toxic. And I'm going to just do one of two short readings from the book. And this is about some personal perspectives of folks who've had this biomonitoring test. And this is from the first chapter called Indecent Exposure, The Intimate Details. Charlotte Brody was surprised by how she felt about her test results. The nurse and mother of two was among the first people in the general population to be tested for a wide range of industrial chemicals. The tests revealed that Charlotte's body contained dioxin, PCBs, mercury, lead, cosmetic chemicals, and lawn chemicals, 85 toxins in all, manufactured by companies such as Dow, Shell, Union Carbide, Exxon, and Monsanto. I felt violated, Charlotte reported. She was especially upset about the pesticides. I never used them in my house. They'd never been on my lawn. I bought organic whenever I could. Nevertheless, her body contained several variations of organophosphates and organochlorines that were designed to attack the nervous systems of insects. How could Dow put Dursban into me when I never said they could? When I never used their product, never bought their product, and never even knew I was in the presence of their product, Charlotte wanted to know. Isn't that trespassing? Mary Brune remembers the exact moment she got angry. It was March 2005, and her baby, Olivia, had just turned 6 months old. I came home one night after work and watched the TV news while nursing, Mary recalled. Texas Tech University had conducted a study of breast milk in 19 states and found that all the milk samples were contaminated with perchlorate, a component of rocket fuel. I'm sitting there on my couch nursing my daughter, and I was stunned. I thought breast milk was as pure as it came as a food source for children. To find out there's all sorts of stuff in there, I was up all night thinking about it. Michelle Hammond wasn't quite sure what to think. Hers was the first family in the U.S. to be biomonitored as part of a series of stories in the Oakland Tribune. The results stunned even scientists, wrote Douglas Fisher in the award-winning series. The test found plasticizers, mercury, lead, cadmium, and Teflon in the bodies of the 2 parents and 2 children. 5-year-old Michaela had more dibutyl phthalate, a cosmetic chemical, than most of the kids tested in the U.S. But the biggest surprise was what they found in 2-year-old Rowan. Higher levels of flame-retardant chemicals than had been found in nearly anyone else in the world, 6 times higher than the levels found in his parents, and twice the levels at which researchers start to see impaired fertility in lab animals. This is a very serious warning of very small children being heavily exposed, said one of the leading scientists on flame-retardant chemicals. And this was a family that lived in Berkeley, California, lived a relatively clean lifestyle, and so the results were surprising to them and to the researchers. And so these are really the stories of all of us, and even the stories of those who aren't yet born. A study last year looked at the umbilical cord blood of 10 babies that were chosen at random in U.S. hospitals, and the researchers found an average of 200 chemicals known to be toxic in every single sample of cord blood. So we know now through this new science that babies are being born pre-polluted. We know that the pollutants running through the rivers are running through our veins. And so now that we see this picture and we hear this information, it's natural to start questioning things that we've always taken for granted, like what's in that stuff on the bathroom sink. And it's natural to start asking questions like, shouldn't products like baby shampoo be made without chemicals linked to cancer? And unfortunately, product tests conducted this January found the chemical 1,4-dioxane, which is a probable human carcinogen, according to EPA, in low levels in dozens of popular bubble baths and baby shampoos, including Sesame Street character brands and even the iconic Pure and Gentle Johnson & Johnson. And it might be reasonable to ask, shouldn't products like expensive lipstick not contain lead? And 2 weeks ago, we released product tests that found that 61% of the lipsticks that we looked at had lead, and it was a wide range of lead in the products. And the top offenders were L'Oreal, CoverGirl, and a Christian Dior Addict brand that sells for $24 a tube. So we find that the more expensive products aren't necessarily safer. Now, the good news is that 39% of the products we tested had no lead, and we know that it's possible to make products without 1,4-dioxane, without lead, and many companies are doing it. But the bad news, instead of apologizing and saying they'll get the lead out, L'Oreal said, well, we stand behind our products and they're in full compliance with FDA regulations. but there are no FDA regulations, and that's really the heart of the problem that we see, is that the system in the U.S. that we have for cosmetic safety is trust the companies, and many of these companies just are not making decisions in our best interest. So my colleagues and I started asking questions about personal care products about 5 years ago. We were concerned about a particular chemical called phthalates, which is linked to reproductive harm. And hundreds of animal studies show that phthalates can interfere with the production of testosterone, leading to effects like birth defects of the penis, undescended testicles, lowered sperm counts. Again, effects that we're seeing increase in humans over the past 3 decades. And there was actually yesterday a front page story in USA Today about phthalates and another chemical, bisphenol A. Everywhere chemicals and plastics alarm parents, and it's a very good story. We really, as Dory said, are seeing this issue break into mainstream consciousness. So I think that's a really important and great thing, because we've been working on this issue for years and nobody mostly cared, but now suddenly we're having a national conversation about it, so I think that's great. And we launched the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics in 2002. Women's Voices for the Earth was one of 3 groups that launched the campaign with a report called Not Too Pretty, where we reported that more than 70% of products that we tested, shampoos, deodorants, fragrance, contained phthalates. And so we took this information to the beauty industry, and we said, hey, would you please get this nasty toxic chemical out of personal care products? And we actually thought this was not such a big deal to ask companies to do, because the European Union had already banned some of the worst phthalates from cosmetics. So the companies were in the process already of having to reformulate. So we thought, okay, we'll just go and ask them, while you're doing that, could you take them out of products in the U.S.? So my colleague Bryony Schwan, who founded Women's Voices for the Earth, made more than 30 phone calls to the top 5 companies to have this conversation. It was 5 and 6 calls each to L'Oreal, Estee Lauder, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, and Revlon. And to sum up the company's responses in Bryony's words, she said, they blew me off totally. And then what followed was a series of bizarre encounters with the beauty industry, which I explain in the book. And just as one example, and since I'm already mad at L'Oreal, I especially love to tell this story, but so L'Oreal never did return any of the 5 phone calls, but we got a letter from their lawyer threatening to sue us because we were using the phrase, because we're worth it. We were called the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics because we're worth it. And that's a variation of L'Oreal's trademark slogan, aren't you worth it, as in aren't you worth spending lots more money on hair color than other brands. So we found that, L'Oreal actually owns those words and that concept, and I thought that was very creepy. And unfortunately, we've seen many ugly side of the beauty industry examples like that in the past 5 years that we've been doing this work. But I've also seen many beautiful stories and many inspiring things. So I want to tell a few of those stories because a few people who have read the book, somebody said this to me tonight, it's kind of scary, and I didn't want it to be scary. I want it to also be empowering because I actually feel hopeful. I mean, I do this work every day. I know a lot more than I ever wanted to know about chemicals, but I feel very hopeful because I've seen so many positive signs, and I've seen there are wonderful companies making better products. There are a lot of small companies really built on values of economic justice and social justice, and companies that are really working on figuring out how can we make products as safe as possible. And we have some of those companies here giving out free samples, and we'll hear from some of them later. We have 600 companies that have signed our pledge, the Compact for Safe Cosmetics, and that doesn't include any of the big multinationals that I named earlier, but it does include just about most of the other companies out there. And it's a huge and growing market, the natural products industry. And so we've seen also that the beauty industry can, will, and is going to have to do better. And one of the huge victories that we saw in the past few years, and this was again in large part due to the organizing of Women's Voices for the Earth, the most major brands of nail polish reformulated to remove what we call the toxic trio of ingredients, toluene, formaldehyde, and dibutyl phthalate. And that was after a huge organizing effort of pressuring the companies, you're taking these ingredients out in Europe, you have to take them out here. So the conversations, the letters, the phone calls didn't work, so we went out on the streets. We dressed up like beauty queens on the Santa Monica Promenade, called Mistreatment. We put ads in the newspaper, we did media work, we organized in salons, we wrote letters, and the companies changed their products. And just last summer, OPI Nail Products, which is, you'd probably know it as the nail salon brand, that brand that's in all salons. They were the last holdout. After 2 meetings, they told us, we're not going to change these products. And then when the LA Times called them, they were suddenly announcing that they would change their products. So that is a huge victory for especially the women who work in salons, many of whom are of childbearing age, and they are exposed to these chemicals day in and day out. So products got a little bit safer. We saw that companies can change. We didn't see anybody go out of business. Prices didn't go up. Things just went on as usual. So now we're saying that's a great first step. Now we need to do a lot more. And in order to do that, we're going to need federal regulations. And as we wait for that to happen, we see some states moving forward. So we've had political victories. California, just 2 weeks ago, passed a ban on phthalates in children's toys, which is huge and is going to change the toy market in the United States to remove chemicals that have been gone from European products for 10 years. California also passed the California Safe Cosmetics Act 2 years ago, and one of the most inspiring things of all I've seen were the teen girls who lobbied in California to get that bill passed. They went to Sacramento 3 and 4 times. They met with the governor's aide. We were all surprised when the governor signed that bill, and the girls really felt like they did it, and it was so heartening to see young girls realizing that they have a political voice and what they say matters. And I think that is the most beautiful thing. Yeah. And we've also seen exciting new developments in science. Scientists are learning how to make chemicals that aren't toxic. They know the properties of a chemical now that makes it toxic. And this new science is called green chemistry, and we're starting to see more on that. And I was just telling someone earlier, the mainstream cosmetics industry had a green chemist speak at their annual meeting. So that was a good first step, but the next step is that they have to move from interest and curiosity to funding, to really putting hard dollars into the universities so that we can get green chemistry going. And we can really start to change the way the entire material economy unfolds, because our economy is built on toxic petrochemicals that need to change. And so that's why we see all of these toxic products and the toxic buildup in our bodies. So the market's shifting, politics is shifting, science is shifting, and I think it's an exciting time to be alive. And I just wanted to read one last section from the book. And before I do, I wanted to say I'm going to ask people to do 3 things tonight before you leave. To come to our table and sign up. We're going to be sending around sign-up sheets for the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics and Women's Voices for the Earth. So you can sign up for action alerts and find out, keep up to date with what's going on. Secondly, we're selling books tonight as a fundraiser for Women's Voices for the Earth. And I really tried to write the book in a way that is a conversation starter, so that it's a kind of a fun read. It tells the personal stories of people, and I want it to be used just to start conversations among you and your friends about what can we do to make this change toward healthier products and a healthier economy go faster. And then third, you can also check out our website, safecosmetics.org, where you can access our database of products and do your own research into figuring out what's in products. And the database also identifies safer alternatives. So there's tools consumers can use to make better choices. And I'm just going to end with a reading from my last chapter, which is called Extreme Makeover, as in giving the government and the beauty industry a makeover. The women went to the Dow Chemical Company shareholder meeting carrying 5,000 brooms and chemical-contaminated soil from their hometown. In India, the broom is a woman's symbol of power. Being struck by a jadoo broom is the ultimate insult, explained Champi Deva Shukla. By delivering jadoos to Dow, we're telling the company to clean up its mess in Bhopal. 2 decades after a chemical plant meltdown sent 27 tons of toxic gas into their sleeping city, the women of Bhopal, India, are leading the fight to bring justice to their people and to remind the world about the worst face of the chemical revolution. Mothers everywhere in the world carry chemical poisons in their breasts said Rashida B. as she accepted the 2004 Goldman Environmental Prize with Shukla for their efforts in Bhopal. We are not expendable. We are not flowers offered at the altar of profit and power. We are dancing flames committed to conquering darkness and to challenging those who threaten the planet and the magic and mystery of life. Women have long been flames at the forefront of the fight for environmental health and justice. From Rachel Carson, who wrote Silent Spring, to Lois Gibbs and the families of Love Canal, to the women of Bhopal and thousands of others around the world who are fighting to clean up dangerously contaminated communities. Women have long borne the brunt of pollution and poverty, yet today more women have more power than ever before. Women have economic power, and as the primary shoppers and largest bloc of voters in the United States, women can shift the balance of power and change the face of the future. We are the ones we've been waiting for, as the poet June Jordan said, and as Alice Walker affirmed in the title of her new book. It is the best of times, Walker wrote, because we have entered a period, if we can bring ourselves to pay attention, of great clarity as to cause and effect. We know now that the environment is us. It is our wombs, our breast milk, and our families. Protecting the environment is about enabling future generations of our children to thrive in their bodies unpolluted. There is so much cleaning up to do. The problem right in front of our faces, the toxic products on the bathroom sink, is a good place to start. First cosmetics, then on to the next cleanup project, the plastic industry, the petrochemical industry, the oil and war industries too, until there are no more toxic chemicals in babies, rocket fuel in breast milk, or communities burdened by toxic pollution, until we create new economic systems that are compatible with life and healthy for people and the planet. Each better choice is a step on the road to getting there, and everybody in this room has the power to make it happen. So thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Stacy. I actually, that's one of my favorite passages in the book, which you just read, so I love that. So what I want to do now is introduce all of you to the other 4 speakers we have here tonight, who I'm very grateful for. And the way we're going to do this is I'm going to introduce each one of them in the order in which they're going to speak, and then when they're done, we'll have the question and answer session so that you all can ask any burning questions you have or clarifications that you may want from any of us here. So our first speaker tonight will be David Shepard. Dr. Shepard is an associate professor at the University of Montana. His education includes a BS in molecular biology from the Florida Institute of Technology and training as a cellular immunologist at Dartmouth Medical School. He earned his PhD in toxicology from Oregon State University, where he also did his postdoctoral training in molecular pharmacology. He has been a faculty member in the Department of Biomedical and Pharmaceutical Sciences and the Center for Environmental Health Sciences at University of Montana since 2002. His research interests include investigating the effects of environmental pollutants such as dioxins on the immune system. Additionally, his laboratory also studies how herbal extracts such as echinacea and ginseng can modulate immune function. After David, Alexandra Gorman will speak. Alex is the Director of Science and Research for Women's Voices for the Earth. She has a master's degree in environmental studies from the University of Montana and a BA from Amherst College. Prior to working at Women's Voices, Alex worked in the Epidemiology and Statistics Unit at the American Lung Association headquarters in New York. As Director of Science and Research, Alex implements and oversees all scientific review, publications, and other materials designed to support our programs and our organizational development. Alex is also the author of 2 widely distributed reports looking at toxic chemicals in both the nail industry and in household cleaning chemicals. After Alex, we'll hear from Cindy Duncan. As a local Missoula business owner and regional manager for Color Science, Cindy Duncan considers herself an educator and consultant in mineral makeup, sunscreen, and other skin products. In 2001, Cindy joined Color Science, a mineral makeup company specializing in products sold to spas, medical spas, and through dermatologists, estheticians, and plastic surgeons. Her work has taken her across the country to meet with top experts in the field of skin treatments. In 2002, Cindy opened Skin Chic here in Missoula, which is an all-inclusive skincare shop that provides consulting, makeup artists, and makeup products. Cindy's interest in Skin Chic was to provide a one-stop shop for women with skin problems and makeup needs, and a place to help people live longer, better, healthier lives. Jessica Iklasoy. is the founder of California Baby. She isn't a fan of doing things halfway. When the Los Angeles native decided to create a family, she didn't just pop a few folic acid capsules and call it a day. She started cleaning up her lifestyle by eating organically and becoming a vegetarian. And when the first of her 2 sons arrived 16 years ago, she was curious about the ingredients in his shampoo and started researching them, only to find that many were potential carcinogens. So she resolved to create a natural and non-toxic shampoo, marking the birth of California Baby, a line of more than 45 products that can be found nationally at natural health food stores such as Whole Foods Market and mass marketers such as Target, as well as on the company's website at californiababy.com. So I welcome our speakers tonight, and I'll turn it over to David. Thank you.
Thank you, Dory. First off, I'd like to thank the organizers of the event tonight for inviting me to participate in this panel discussion, and it's great to see all of you here tonight. I'd next like to thank Stacy and congratulate her on her book. I think it's a wonderful read, and she succeeded in it being a conversation starter, certainly. Being invited here as a toxicologist, I thought I would share with you briefly a couple of the central principles in toxicology. The first being the fact that the dose makes the poison. That's a central concept that we work with in toxicology. And what that means is any chemical that you get exposed to has the potential to be toxic. It really just depends on how much of it you're exposed to. And a lot of this is really important as far as when we discuss cosmetics. You look on the back of a bottle of shampoo and there's potentially 30, 40 different chemicals there, but it doesn't give you any information as to actually how much of those chemicals are within that product. So it's really important to understand the concentration. The other is when we're talking about cosmetics, what other sources of the chemicals are we being exposed to? A lot of it comes from our diet, different foods that we eat. Second would be the exposure. If a chemical is hazardous but you're never exposed to it, it may not be toxic to you. And a lot of this that will play into it is whether you're repeatedly exposed to these types of chemicals and the particular route of exposure. So oftentimes toxicological data is generated for lots of chemicals, but it may be through a route of ingestion, orally for instance, and not dermally, as you might apply a lot of cosmetics for instance. The third would be that these chemicals, although we look at them, especially as their toxic potential individually, most of these chemicals, as we already discussed, will show up in mixtures. And it's very important that we understand that chemical toxic potential can be very, very different when we put lots of different chemicals together. So the fact that we may have chemical A and chemical B, when you put them together, they may not be anything like A plus B. And I think that was touched upon in your book, Stacy. The fourth is that natural products aren't always safe. There was an article actually today in New York Times that had a quote from one of the characters in the book, Jane Houlihan, who was talking about the fact that the natural products industry is also not regulated for the most part, similar to the cosmetic industry. So just thinking that there's synonyms as far as natural and safe may not always be the best plan. So the last thing that I wanted to touch upon was that for the reading through the book, again, which I thoroughly enjoyed, there were really 2 take-home messages for me. The first was to get informed. And I think that's really important as far as you as a consumer, you as a citizen, to be able to find sources of information that you can take in the information and make your own decisions and not necessarily have people tell you what the answer might be. And I think there's lots of ways to do this, and one of them I think that's a very valuable resource is the Skin Deep database that is touched upon in Stacy's book, and it's really helpful. In fact, I'm going to pull it up tonight when you come and ask me questions so I can use it. If you want to go further than that, you can pull in the scientific literature itself through PubMed, through the National Library of Medicine. It also works very well if you're having trouble sleeping. You can read a lot of these scientific articles. So some of the things that you may not be aware of is that actually within the University of Montana, there's a lot of environmental health science research going on. And in the Center for Environmental Health Sciences, there are people that are doing cutting-edge research on a lot of different chemicals of environmental concern, including lead, nanoparticles, asbestos, arsenic, and dioxin. So it really is a lot of stuff going on locally as far as cutting-edge research. And there are opportunities to understand what research is going on here and also to communicate this information to you through a lot of different programs through the University of Montana. I've got to get the plug in. And these can come from actually not only you being informed, but also having your children being educated as to what the potential toxicities are with these chemicals. And University of Montana offers Spectrum, which is a nice science learning classroom that's very new here. I highly encourage you to do that. Also, there are other programs that we have here that deal with actually air toxic in the big sky, which talks about different chemicals that pollute the air that we all breathe. And also Researchers in the Schools is a program that the University of Montana and the CHS operates. It really take the researchers from here and visiting researchers into the classrooms of different high schools, junior high schools, and allow them to interact with the children so they can become educated as well. So the second take-home message from the book for me was not only to get informed, but also to get involved. And I think that's really part of the message I think that Stacy is really sending here, and that is that if you feel as though the cosmetics industry is doing you wrong by putting these chemicals in, that you should get involved. You should contact them and tell them that it's something that you're not going to do, or speak better with your wallet and not buy their products if you really feel that way. And finally, I'd be remiss if, as a researcher, I didn't share with you the fact that to get involved also would mean contacting your politicians, both state and federal, to insist that they support more money going into research. All right, so we have more information about these types of chemicals, and we can make more informed decisions. So please, I urge you to contact your congressmen and your senators and have them support bills that will put more money into the National Institute of Health and allow us through grants to do more research on environmental chemicals of concern. Thank you.
Thanks, David. We're doing a lot of our work for us. It's fantastic. I'm Alexandra Gorman. I've been working for Women's Voices for the Earth for about 7 years, and it's just so great to see all these people here. I think it's one of the best crowds we've had for any of our events, and I think as Stacy was saying, we've been passionate about these issues for so many years, and it's so nice to have a big crowd of people who don't think we're just completely crazy. So it's just very rewarding to see you all here. I get to tell you a little bit about the work that Women's Voices for the Earth has been doing as part of the campaign for Safe Cosmetics. As a founder of the campaign, we've always been interested in working to reduce women's exposure to toxic chemicals, and particularly those women who are disproportionately impacted. A lot of times these are women of color, and in this case, they're certainly women who work directly in the beauty industry. As Stacy was telling you, according to the Skin Deep database, nail polishes and nail treatments are one of the products that come up. They've got this toxic trio of dangerous chemicals, and they come up to the top of the list of some of the most toxic products out there. So naturally, we became concerned with the people who are working with these products day in and day out, the folks working in nail salons. You know, there's a different exposure when you're, at home. Maybe you're doing your nails once a month, once every 6 weeks, compared to women who are doing nails literally all day long, every day. We were concerned about their exposure. It's a really growing industry. There are about 380,000 nail salon workers in the U.S. today. This number is growing. 96% of them are women. About 41% of them are Asian. And as you might have guessed sort of from the theme of this evening, there's very little regulation to protect these women. So when we started looking into this industry, we focused initially on OPI, as Stacy was telling you. I won't tell you about the campaign. She told you a little bit about it. You got to read about it in the book. There are some fantastic photos. It was a great campaign to work on because it's really nice to be excited about an issue and feel very strongly about an issue and have a lot of fun at the same time. The companies weren't necessarily so happy, but they responded well, so we were pleased with that. What we learned through doing this campaign, we had this huge victory in the spring of 2007 in terms of OPI and a number of these other companies taking these chemicals out of their nail polish. And what we learned in doing this is that there were a lot of other organizations out there who were sort of coming out of the woodwork who were also really concerned about nail salon workers particularly. There were Asian health groups and Asian women's groups who had been thinking all along, there's a lot of women in these industries. There aren't a lot of regulations to protect them. They're exposed to a variety of conditions. And there are language barriers for information. There are all kinds of cultural barriers as to whether or not they're going to speak out about the conditions that they're faced with. And that nobody really quite knew what to do with them. So really, the OPI nail polish was kind of the tip of the iceberg. We realized there were a lot of other hazards in the nail salon as well, associated with acrylic nails, associated with solvents and the nail polish remover, for one thing, which needed to be addressed. So one thing that we did in the last year, we put together a report called Glossed Over. And this report was pulling together all the research we could find on chemicals in nail products and on impacts on nail salon workers. While we could find, various studies on the various chemicals, what we found is there's virtually no research on nail salon workers. They're an incredibly understudied demographic group. And so while we know there are a lot of concerns about the chemicals they're exposed to, there are a lot of concerns about the conditions in various nail salons, we really don't have any data to talk about to find out what sort of health effects these nail salon workers are really experiencing, other than through anecdotal information. And we know anecdotally there are a lot of women who, when they get pregnant, for instance, they quit their jobs because they're concerned about what they're being exposed to. But we don't have any data on what is actually happening to those women in the long term. So really this demographic really has really been glossed over. We need greater attention to protect their health. So what Women's Voices for the Earth is doing now with a number of other groups, including the National Asian Pacific Women's Forum, there's a California Collaborative on healthy nail salons. We're pulling together groups around the country. We formed what's called the National Healthy Nail Salon Alliance. And we're bringing these groups together to share strategies, to share information, and to really use our combined voices to change the industry and protect these folks. So I strongly encourage you to check out Women's Voices for the Earth's website, which is www.womenandenvironment.org. We've got lots of information up at the tables, and to look for the updates from the Alliance as we progress with this work. So thanks.
I guess I'm up next. I'm used to standing when I do little presentations. This is going to be unique for me to stay seated. I'm Cindy Duncan, and I am here representing Color Science Mineral Makeup. Just to give you a little history, we're talking a little bit about entrepreneurship. And Diane Ranger, the owner of Color Science, she started Bare Essentials in 1977. She was a granola hippie in Los Gatos, California, and she started that company, Bare Essentials, as a bath and body store. And it was all recycling. Everybody would just take their containers and get refills. And it was all aromatherapy and everything. And she got a very large clientele, big cult following. And they said, well, what kind of makeup should we wear? And she said, well, I'll go take a look and give you some recommendations. And she looked, and she came back and said, none of it. So she started doing research, and she always says without the advantage of the internet. So she started looking and started out with Egyptian coal from Cleopatra, and think, okay, that's color, it's natural, what can we do? And so she literally invented the mineral makeup industry. So she's going to be coming out with a book next year and doing a book tour, so we'll get the whole story behind all of that. But mineral makeup is so popular because it has no dyes, no chemicals, no talc, no mineral oil, no harsh chemicals, and no drying alcohols. And we're very proud of that with Color Science because we do everything in small batches. This is Diane's child, mineral makeup is. She doesn't have any children. This is her passion. And so you see mineral makeup all over the place, and there's lots of great copycats out there, but unfortunately, they're not real mineral makeup, because if you have anything of those 5 ingredients in your formulations, it negates you to be a mineral makeup. So mineral makeup is just wonderful because it's sunscreen that's chemical-free, that's instant, super easy to apply. Comes in a brush form, and that's just kind of the history of mineral makeup. Thank you.
Hello. Well, my story is a little bit different. I started cleaning up my lifestyle and had a child, and I was shopping at the health food store. And I brought a shampoo home and started looking the ingredients up and found that several of the ingredients in my health food store shampoo were listed as potential carcinogens, namely sodium lauryl sulfate and synthetic fragrances. So that really shocked me because I thought I was doing everything right, which a lot of us do, and we might not realize that at the health food store level, it isn't regulated, and they do use synthetic fragrances. And so I went out and started looking for alternatives and using pure essential oils. And one thing people might not know is that when a fragrance is listed as natural, it isn't necessarily a pure essential oil. It's a synthetic copy of a scent found in nature. So there's lots of label reading to take place, and I go to the database, the cosmetic database all the time, and I didn't have the advantage back then, 16, 17 years ago, so it was to the library. And the other thing I'd like to say as a manufacturer is I love to hear from customers, and I always want to hear what you have to say about our products. And we actually did make changes to the California Baby line about 5 years ago. We were using nut oils. And a lot of customers were calling or emailing and saying, my kid is allergic to nuts. And we were using ingredients that we thought were really great, like kukui nut, babasu oil, and we thought, oh, these have really great properties. But then I thought, well, what's the big deal? It's not that important. Let me go out and find an alternative. And so, companies do listen to their customers, but their customers have to communicate with them. So even though that company may not be replying to your email or your phone call, at least smaller companies, they are listening. So I would really encourage you as consumers to communicate with them. And if you like their products, support them. And if you don't support them. And that's it.
I'm sorry, I forgot one. I know you guys wanted me to do some stories, and I forgot this one fabulous one that we tell all the time. And we were just talking about, I'm kind of loony crazy. Anyway, so lipsticks, and we're talking about dyes and chemicals and lipsticks, and we have this great, everything in color science, absolutely no dyes, everything's done with minerals. And we had a client in Colorado that she had some lymph issues just underneath her, right in her armpit, and so once a quarter she would go to the doctor and he would drain her lymphs and her lymph nodes. I'm sorry, I'm not as highly educated as you are. Lymph nodes. And she started using the Color Science lip polishes, which are completely dye-free, and within 8 months she realized that she was not going back to the doctor. So she's been doing just the Color Science lip products. And we do a thing called a chemical-free lip week, where if you want to really get off all the chemicals, you can do that, and with these different serums and lip polishes. And so it's been 4 years. She has not had to go back and get any sort of lymph drainage. So that's just the difference between, lead and dyes and chemicals and things like that. So it can be done. You can have beautiful colors without having any chemicals or dyes. So just wanted to add that in.
We are lucky to have this panel here in Missoula tonight. It's really great to see this many people show up to support Women's Voices for the Earth and the campaign for safe cosmetics. My name is Melissa Piccoli. A lot of you know me as your esthetician. I see a lot of familiar faces out here. And I'm also thrilled to be helping Women's Voices for the Earth stand up for our right to a toxin-free household. This is a great opportunity for us to demand that our beauty rituals are not laden with mysterious consequences. I demand it. We've had this dialogue amongst a lot of us for a long time, and this is a perfect opportunity for this. We are going to open up the panel for questions. We are recording, so I ask that you speak clearly and with some kind of volume. And I hope that you're going to leave tonight feeling a little bit better about making good choices and knowing that you have the strength of knowledge behind those choices. There are many tools out there for us to use. So I'm opening up the panel for questions. Yes?
Many skin products brands use plastic microbeads as an alternative to organic substances. These microbeads are proven to have a directly negative effect on marine biosystems. Is this in your agenda?
I don't know.
That's a tricky one.
Either of you heard of
Yeah, have you heard of it? Yeah,
Did you not hear the question?
Oh, repeat the question.
So many companies are using plastic microbeads instead of natural alternatives.
It's like in skin scrub product.
As far as the skin scrub, so it's like an actual grit. And he wants to know what the panel thinks about this plastic versus a natural exfoliating grit.
I don't know anything about that in particular, but it sounds bad to me. I mean, I'm thinking of the continent-sized plastic island out floating in the Pacific. I mean, plastic is a huge problem. And I do know that a lot of companies use PVC plastic for even a lot of the natural companies in the little bags. So the PVC #3 plastic, and particularly products that are in it, will definitely be leaching phthalates and other problematic chemicals. So,
Stacy, I know a little bit about that. I mean, there are alternatives. There's jojoba beads, that are natural and do biodegrade. So there are alternatives if you contact the companies that are using what you don't like and ask them to switch, they might do that.
And there's also alternatives like rice flour, like cornmeal. There are alternatives to the plastic. I'm sure that's very questionable. Yes, right up there. I'm sorry. Do products from Bath and Body Works use chemicals?
you can look it up. You can look it up on the Skin Deep database, so that those products should be in there. I think Bath and Body Works uses a lot of synthetic fragrance. So fragrance is a problem because we don't know what's in it. There can be dozens or even literally up to hundreds of chemicals in that product that aren't listed on the label. Anything that says fragrance, and even if it's fragrance-free, it will often have a masking fragrance. But those products in particular seem to be heavily scented. Yeah, those.
So it's in there. That's, yeah.
So.
And if a fragrance doesn't disappear, if it hangs around all day long, it is synthetic, and that's the difference between essential oils and synthetic oils. Essential oils evaporate, and eventually the scent will go away. So that's one way to tell whether you're using a synthetic or a natural essential oil.
Yes, right up here.
About lighting department, baby clothes, mattresses, car seats. How long does that last? And like over years, does the chemical diminish?
Yeah.
I'm a mother, I have small children, I'm trying to get rid of that stuff, but again, I also feel guilty throwing things away. So how long does that stay on a product?
Did everybody hear that? And just so you know, there are microphones on either side at the end of the aisle, so if anybody wants to stand up and go to the microphone. But she's curious about the chemicals that are actually on top of baby seats, mattresses, clothes, and how long does it take for that to actually wear off?
Talk a little bit about that. I don't know if I can answer your exact question. We know that this is a growing problem. It's something that they've recently started testing for, and they've found, even here in Montana, women have been tested, the breast milk of women has been tested and found these chemicals in breast milk. It does build up in people's bodies, which is a problem. We know it comes off of products. I mean, it's found in a lot of electronics, like the plastic housing of televisions and computers and that kind of thing. And we know that it migrates out of these products. So some of it will stay in there because over time your TV will still be fairly flame retardant. But it does come out. They found very high levels in household dust. So that's one place where it ends up going. The good thing is there are a lot of people working on this around the country. And several of the brominated flame retardants have been phased out. There's a lot of work to get the other ones phased out. There was a bill passed in Washington last year that was very successful, and they're working in some other states as well. So we're hoping, fairly soon we're going to be able to sort of bring the bans on these chemicals across nationally. But you're right, the issue is there is so much stuff out there. People have couches for for many years. People have televisions and computers and all kinds of other products for a long time. And so we will be dealing with these chemicals for a very long time.
one little bit of good news on that, there is a big legislative battle going on around flame retardants, both trying to ban some of the worst ones, but also some states are trying to legislate requirements for flame retardants. So that we tried to do something about that in California, but the effort died. But one good thing that did just happen in California is self-extinguishing cigarettes, which is really the answer to fires. Most house fires are caused by cigarettes, and so requiring the cigarette industry to make self-extinguishing cigarettes is a good step toward fixing that problem without the chemicals.
Yes, right here.
There is a catalog store that has sheets and bedding without resin. They are much more expensive. But my question is, do you all coordinate with PETA at all?
Did everybody hear that? She asked if we coordinate with PETA. PETA being the animal
Yeah,
rights.
that's right. Well, PETA used to have us listed on their green meanies list, but they took us off. But the thing, it's a dilemma because animal tests are really one of the good models for understanding chemicals, but on the other hand, with a chemical like phthalates, they've been studying it for 30 years and they keep testing it on animals. And we already know a lot about the mechanisms for why it's toxic. So the industry keeps testing different strains of animals to try to disprove that. It's crazy what's going on. So there's no need for that. And there's also, Europe has banned animal testing on finished cosmetic products, and so a lot of companies are following that now. And we actually have in the Skin Deep database, it says what the companies that have agreed not to animal test the finished products.
Yes.
I have a similar question to follow up with that. Just going back to the health and beauty aids, is there a relationship or myths just involving safe products and products that say not tested on animals? Because I think a lot of people think that if it's not tested on animals, it's safe, and I don't know the answer, so I'd like to know.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because it is kind of two different issues. You can certainly have products that are not tested on animals that contain, all kinds of chemicals that you might not want in your product. To some degree, there may be some companies that are not testing on animals because they're coming from sort of a more moral ethic, and they may be more likely also to have, less toxic chemicals. But it's not necessarily a guarantee.
I think one thing I'd chime in on that is that not tested on animals may mean not tested. So
Yeah.
is that a better alternative? It's hard to say. I think repetitive testing that kind of goes over and over again using animals is probably not very ethical to do that. Also, there can be instances where oftentimes in toxicology, if you have chemicals that have related structures, you can get information from one chemical and be able to apply it to others. So not as much testing or the same type of testing may not be necessary in that case.
And I would just add that SPF products are tested on humans, they're not tested on animals.
Except for ours works for dogs, because we just tested on.
Did you test it on?
Just use it.
I have a question. Would you explain the notion of hormone mimicking?
So hormone mimicking chemicals or endocrine disruptors, and actually this USA Today story is a great piece of explaining what that is, but hormone disrupting chemicals mimic hormones, either acting like estrogen or they can block estrogen or testosterone, incredibly important hormones for development, particularly of fetuses, but for many, hormones regulate many systems in our bodies. And so interfering with those hormones, particularly at critical developmental points, can lead to all sorts of problems with our bodily systems, the reproductive system, brain development, thyroid function. All of these can be affected by chemicals that disrupt hormones. Is that it? But I'm going to ask David to pick up for me there, because he's the toxicologist.
Well, I think that something you have to be really concerned about is the fact that a chemical that's listed as a hormone mimic or an endocrine disruptor can actually have diametrically exposed or different effects depending on what tissue or organ it's in. So in one tissue, it may be an estrogenic type chemical, and in another, it may be anti-estrogenic. So it really makes a difference as to where the chemical is getting, as to what kind of effects it may have. But clearly, these chemicals have the potential to alter development and also reproductive biology.
And one thing just more about that is the estrogenic chemicals in particular are a concern because we know that the longer a woman is exposed to estrogens throughout her life, the higher her risk of breast cancer. So some of the estrogenic chemicals are suspected of causing early puberty, and we do see a trend in the U.S. with girls entering puberty earlier, particularly African American girls. And the earlier you enter puberty, if it's before 12, you have a 50% higher chance of breast cancer later in life. So entering puberty earlier is problematic for a lot of different reasons. There was just a great report about puberty and what they see in the science and all those trends put out by the Breast Cancer Fund at breastcancerfund.org, if anyone's interested in that.
Yes.
This question might be unanswerable right now, but how common are hormone-mimicking foods? Like, are they in all those products that all the teenage girls use? Like,
yeah, that it is in a way. It's an unanswerable question, but but we do know Skin Deep quantifies that 60% of the products in there have endocrine disruptors or hormone disruptors. So that's what's known, but I think there's a lot unknown about. It's really difficult for scientists to understand what makes a hormone mimic and what doesn't. So, do you want to add to that?
search the site for, I'm not really looking at, but like for products that don't do this, or products, you know what I mean? Products that do.
You can, yeah. There's different ways to search the site, and one commonly used ingredient that we do know is estrogenic is parabens, and the company's always saying, as David was pointing out, it's low levels and the dose makes the poison. The companies always say it's just a little bit of parabens, just a little bit of estrogenic effect. But we don't know how many parabens we would be exposed to. When I looked through my teen beauty routine, it was 26 parabens in total, and we don't know what levels those are in the product. So we have no idea really how much parabens would be getting from products that contain them. Some products contain multiple parabens. So it's a good idea to avoid those, I think.
And also, how many products a day are you using that have the parabens?
Yeah.
So I'd like to just add one thing to your question, I think, and that is that a lot of the screening, I think, that's being done today isn't necessarily as comprehensive as it needs to be to allow a decision to be made as to whether a chemical is truly estrogenic or anti-estrogenic, and that is that you can put it into a system and have it bind the estrogen receptor, but it may not actually generate effects that we see with true estrogens, and it may not be anywhere near the potency as well. So I think the science is still not there for a lot of chemicals, but clearly it's a first step as far as identifying potential hormone mimicking chemicals.
Thanks, Jamie. Yes.
I had read an article in the last few months that was talking about how people presume to use safer, more natural products, but then they end up with an undesirable effect. And it was stories about young boys using things with tea tree oil and lavender oil in them, and they ended up with like secondary breast growth, that they were an estrogen mimicker. And I don't know what the products were. I don't know if there were other chemicals in there that gave that effect, but is that something that you would see if you overuse lavender and tea tree oil?
You know, I actually know a little bit about that because I did take a look at that study because we use essential oils. And, you know, I hate to say things like, oh, the study was flawed, but, and I don't know.
But it was, no, it was.
Just two boys who lived in the same town.
Two anecdotal stories.
Yeah, and they wouldn't list the other ingredients in that product. So it could be any number of things. And many times, mass marketers, when they say they use tea tree, they're really using a synthetic tea tree. They're not really using, it's a pure essential oil, which is very expensive. And I know for a fact that they would never use that. And if they did, they would just use a tiny amount for label claims. So that study was, I don't know that.
There's a couple things that I'd like to include. One is that as long as it's not my study you're talking about, that's fine. The other is that unless the chemicals actually have been characterized in these particular oils, then it's really hard to say whether you're looking at a specifically purified compound, right? So until that's done, it's really difficult to move forward with that.
And just to add, as a company, we test our essential oils for purity because many growers add synthetics into it. So there are a lot of things there as well. It's the purity of the oil too.
So there's just, actually, can I just add one more quick thing? That is that as a scientist, it makes me a little nervous with anecdotal stories. It's not that they should be dismissed, but as far as true, well-controlled science to allow us to really have an understanding of the truth of a potential toxicity of a chemical, you have to be careful with that type of information.
Thank you, Shannon. Yes, right behind you.
Would you mind the panel talking to whoever can do this, talking a little more about parabens and what they are and how frequently they show up in products and what they're used for?
They're a preservative, so they're in, most companies are using them as a preservative, I would say, in the conventional products. We've seen a big shift in the natural products industry in the past few years that companies are using other preservatives. So, yeah, and they're estrogenic. I think there hasn't been a huge amount of study on them, and there needs to be, but we also know there are other ways to preserve products.
Do you have any examples of alternatives for preservatives?
Alternative for preservatives?
Yeah.
Did you guys hear that? She
Yeah.
asked if there are alternatives to preservatives.
I have to cheat with my book. I'm going to look that up because I know I have it in here somewhere, if we want to do another question.
There are
Maybe you know.
alternatives, and one thing I would like to say is as a company, as a manufacturer, it is important to have preservatives in your product. So companies who say that they don't use preservatives, I would be very skeptical because either they're not being completely honest or you've got a lot of funky stuff growing in there on your eyes and around your face, and it is a very serious thing. Some people use phenoxyethanol, they use benzoin, they're using, and the funny thing is people aren't using parabens, but then they're jumping to other ingredients that maybe really aren't as effective. And preservatives, there needs to be more than one preservative. They have to work together. One goes for yeast, and one for mold, and one for bacteria, and one. So that's why you see a lot of different preservatives on there. So I don't know. You're just going to see phenoxyethanol, benzoic acid.
I've seen grapeseed oil more and more. No, not grapeseed, grapefruit seed oil.
Yeah, I mean, that's okay. It helps. You know, certain essential oils have antibacterial properties, but it's just not going to do the job on its own. It really won't.
It's not going to prevent mold.
This is new dialogue. I think that's the really exciting part of this, is this is new dialogue. The research is relatively new, and so we all do get to figure it out together. Unfortunately. I guess we'll do a few more questions, and then we'll come close to wrapping up. How about way back there?
I'm curious as to why none of you mentioned the tremendous pressure on consumers, especially women, from the media and from men, from creators to look a certain way.
Oh, no. We love our lip gloss. We don't want to get rid of our lip gloss. We just want to not cause damage to ourselves by using it. Like, I think that's really important.
That's true, but it's also, it's a good point that you bring out, and it's one of the things that kept me up at night when I was trying to first start the book, because it's so easy to be mad at the beauty industry. And I saw a film that just sticks with me that I talk about in the book called Wet Dreams and False Images, that's about airbrushing, and she actually shows on the film airbrushing in action, and it's just unbelievable. We know it happens, but to see it, I mean, they're going over these photos 30 and 40 times, changing the skin tone of actresses like Halle Berry, shaving down her knuckles because they're too obtrusive. They can take 10, 15, 20 pounds, giving complete body jobs to these models. It's insane, and these images are held up as what we're supposed to achieve, and especially for young girls. It's awful, and it's one of the reasons why I think the campaign is so powerful, to say we need to question what these companies are telling us, the messages and also the products that we think we need.
Yes. Hi, Michelle.
When a company signs the compact for Safe Cosmetics, do they agree to change the bad chemicals in their products within a certain period of time? And then I guess I'm going to address this to Cindy because I was in Skin Chic at the mall and went in there purposely looking for things without parabens in it. And the salesperson said, you know, oh no, we don't have any kind of those things in our products. And I picked up, I think it was some of this facial water mister spray thing.
The
and there
spritzer?
was parabens in that, so.
And I'd like to address that as well. And that's something and we know that paraben use, we have more testing to do. So you've got studies on both sides of the fence that are very good studies. And I think that Diane has chosen to do the very smallest percentage of parabens in her products that are liquid-based. So the Be Still Spritzer, the Creme de la Creme, the Wild Mild, because what she knows is that mold is toxic. And so she'd rather err on the side of caution. And she always tells me, so if you have something, she'd love to hear it. If she can find a better mousetrap, she'd be happy to change over. But she's not going to do something that's not proven to prevent mold, because we know mold is toxic and that will really hurt you. So I think there's a lot of discussion that we need to say that just, we know that parabens are not a great choice, but you also say, well, toxic mold is not a great choice either. And so if you're talking about things that have hydration and water, you need to make sure that you're protected. So if you buy a product that has no preservatives in it at all, it should be refrigerated, it's not going to last over a month, it could have toxic mold, and you could really get sick.
Yeah, and
So
part of
you
it
guys
is
wanna address
also.
that at all?
Well, I think part of it is also we may need to think about our expectations of products, because the 3-year shelf life is maybe, we don't need that. I mean, how many of us have really old, who God knows what in the makeup bag that, you know, it probably has mold and worse. But refrigerating products may be something that someday needs to happen.
And we need to talk about, you know, reality of how people are really going to live their lives and what they're supposed to do, and is
Yeah,
everyone going
that's
to put
true.
their cream and buy a new $80 cream every 30 days and put it in the refrigerator and never leave it out? And are we really going to
Yeah,
put our sunscreen on every
$80
80
cream.
minutes? So we
Yeah.
have to live
Yeah.
in the real world, and so we want to make sure that we try to stay as healthy and protected as possible. So if parabens are something that are an issue for you, you stay away from the things that are in the liquid form that have that small amount. But again, I think you also talked about percentages of dose that is applicable. So again, we would want to say to you, this is percentage of how many parabens and what paraben is in there. Then you can go on a website like Skin Deep or other websites and decide if that's too much or not, or if that's okay for you. But everybody has different parameters.
I think the other thing is that it's not just in cosmetics. Parabens are used as a food
Everywhere.
additive, as an antimicrobial as well. So, I mean, you can try to pick out the portions of your life where you can try to limit exposure to these chemicals, but you really have to be almost a 24/7 job.
And I think you really need to know percentages of what is in what product and how many times you're going to be exposing yourself. I think
There's
with
no way to
exposure-
find out what percentage of parabens is in products, though. That's one thing. Some companies, I think, are using tiny amounts, other companies may be using a lot.
But we
There's no way without product testing to know.
Right.
But on the compact for Safe Cosmetics, just quickly, we asked companies to remove immediately any chemicals that are banned in Europe, and then also to look at chemicals that are linked to a range of different health effects, neurotoxicity, endocrine disruption, and look for safer alternatives over a process of 3 years. But it's a big challenge, and we have meetings twice a year with the companies to try to work through some of the questions and issues around how do you deal with the huge amount that we don't know about many of the ingredients, how do we know alternatives are safer, and how do we have transparency and public reporting and accountability around the compact. So we're going to see some of that start to come into Skin Deep, where you can now find out if a company signed it, where are they on the spectrum. I think there's a huge range among the 600 companies. So we want to try to track that and be transparent about it, but it's a big project.
Actually, just one quick thing. I have one little tidbit, and that is that I've run across a couple papers that have been published in the last year or two that actually say that ginger can reduce the effects of paraben toxicity. So maybe there's something to that.
Drink ginger tea. We're going to do 3 more questions. I know there's a lot of hands up, and I bypassed your hand over and over. I'm sorry, please.
No problem. I've been interested in the lead and lipstick study that just came out, and I was also interested to read that the trade association representing the cosmetic industry just said that the average woman is
is exposed to more lead in the air and breathing and drinking, and that really she shouldn't worry about the cosmetics. And I just wondered then, how do you respond to that claim on their side?
Yeah, well, and also we eat between 4 and 11 pounds of lipstick in our lifetime. So if you're going to ingest it, that's a problem, I think.
Yeah, that makes me crazy when they say there's more in other stuff, because, yeah, there is, but that doesn't absolve them of the responsibility of getting it out of lipstick. So, and I think that's a good, the problem is, we are exposed to low levels in cosmetics, but it's lots of different products, and it's in addition to other sources, and lead builds up in the body over time, so.
I love in your book where you point out that lead is an ingredient that the directions specifically say reapply as often as possible.
Right, so lipstick is something, we know we eat it in some level, so, but we also know lipstick doesn't need to contain it, because even a lot of the mainstream brands that we tested didn't have any lead, so.
We're going to go right here and then back there, and then we're going to have to, and then that's it.
Person get rid of this stuff. I got a lot of that. How should you?
Hazardous waste disposal. I want to take that.
That's a good point.
Send it back to the company in a
Yeah,
nice
that's
little
a
red
good one,
box.
send it back to the company. Yeah.
That's a great idea. Maybe that'll be the next thing we do in Missoula is we get a big box to send back to them.
No, that would be great. We should have brought one tonight.
Send it back.
That'd be fun. Back here? Yes.
I just want to say, just on a word of hope, I met an author, and I can't recall his name, but I remember the name of his book. In Atlanta last year, he wrote a book called Mid-Course Correction. And he's an older woman, I guess was behind me before, but regarding the whole flame retardant, massive chemicals in everything we're manufacturing and producing. Again, the name of the book is Mid-Course Correction. And he's this manufacturer of this enormous rub company. And he started to do some research, I don't know, 8-10 years ago, on just the amount of toxins in their industry just to produce the rubs, not even once the rubs leave the company. And long story short, he's now become an international speaker, and it just, they reformulated how they manufacture their carpets, and it gives you so much hope. And they,
Yeah, Ray Anderson is from Interface.
FLOR, is that right?
Yeah, he wants to sell absolutely nothing for the rest of his, yeah, but makes everything.
So again, I'm glad other people have heard about it. It just gives us hope for corporate America, and a book that we can bring to CEOs and heads of corporations who are willing to start taking responsibility. And then I wanted to address your question, or your comment at the very end. Keep your minds open, because companies are finding ways to overcome things like parabens in our ingredients. We have a company that we're working with that's out of Japan, and they actually have discovered this water that is antioxidant in its base, and it's bacteriostatic. Bacteria cannot grow in the water, and that's the base of a new skincare line coming to America from Japan in a month. So, we'll keep in touch with Weave and try to get the word out so people know that these things are available. But we do have to keep hope, and like Cindy said, keep dialoguing and keep learning and keep educating. People are open to changing, and there's good things happening.
Thank you for that. And we're going to be out at the tables if anyone wants to ask more questions, and selling books is a fundraiser for Women's Voices for the Earth.
Yeah, just quickly. I just quickly, again, want to thank Stacy for coming to Missoula as part of the book tour. I want to thank our panel speakers and Melissa for her organizing and moderation. I want to thank the University of Montana for making it possible, and I want to extend a special thank you to all of you for taking time to be here tonight and your interest in these issues. Please do take time to speak further with any of the panelists. Please pick up information on your way out. Buy a book for yourself or for your friend or for your husband or wife. And tell L'Oreal to get the lead out of lipstick. Thank you.